I found out that my child-free boyfriend of 3 years had a 4-year-old child that he knew about. Yesterday, I broke it off with him. I honestly don't know why I stalled in doing this, but I think I was just in shock and couldn't process the whole situation. There was no getting through this. It was done from the moment I found out. If you didn't know, I found out my ex had a child when we went to meet a financial advisor and accountant before we moved in together. Before I broke it off with him, I decided to meet him in person to get my things back and give him his. I met him in a park in a public place and I went with a friend who stayed nearby. I honestly wanted to know why he did this, why he wasted both of our time, why he couldn't go for someone who either had a child or wanted them in the future. He basically said that he knew when he met me that he wanted to pursue me. Though we've been together for 3 years, I have known him for 5. When we first started dating, he lived 3 hours from me and we moved his business and his whole life so our relationship wouldn't be long distance. We were introduced by a friend of his about 5 years ago, and in the 2 years before we started dating, he was more of an acquaintance that would come into town to visit his friend. His friend and I were close, so I think that's how he got to know a lot about me, like how I was child-free and would never date a man who had a possibility of having a child or wanting one. When he asked me out, I not only asked the friend that introduced us if he wanted kids, but I asked my ex as well, and he said that he never wanted children and he didn't have any. For the 3 years we were together, we also discussed not having children numerous times, so I thought we were on the same page. Clearly, that was all a lie. When I met him at the park, he had a file full of documents and he brought his file so he could explain to me why he did what he did and the lengths he went through so that we could be a couple. As he explained what happened, he showed me proof, especially of the court paperwork. First, that the child, that's how he referred to his son the whole conversation, is actually 5 and not 4. His son recently had a birthday. When we met, unbeknownst to me, my ex was already a father and the baby was a few months old. He had gotten a former ex pregnant and she had a kid and they had 50-50 custody for about a year. According to him though, they weren't together. He was an active father and they had an amicable relationship. As he got to know me and found out the info from his friend, he realized I would never give him a chance because he had a child. I vaguely remember him visiting and all of us going to lunch with other friends, and he and his friends kept bringing up strange scenarios that would make me change my mind about dating men with children. For example, saying something like, if the guy was perfect for you in every way, but he had a child or wanted children, you would never be with him? And my answer was always no, because my perfect guy didn't want kids. Knowing that I would never date a man who had a child, he decided when his child was 1 that he had to get rid of that responsibility. I'm not joking, that's what he said. He slowly started to see his child less, and it was bizarre listening to him methodically explain how he removed himself from every responsibility that had to do with his child. From lessening the days he saw him, to not picking him up from daycare, to not going to doctor's appointments. He did this over months until his ex saw that he was serious about not being involved in any way but monetary. He eventually went to his ex and told her that he wanted to terminate his rights. He would pay for child support more than what was required, but he didn't want any responsibility. In addition to that, he paid his ex to go to court with him to change the child's last name and remove his and just leave the mother's name. Once the child's last name had been changed, child support had been set up and he terminated his rights. Only then did he ask me out. He said he did all of this for me so that we could have a chance and that he wanted to come to me child-free as well, which is why he waited for everything to be settled in court first. So he basically spent a year getting rid of his child, and he presented it as a challenge he went through to get me, and he didn't understand why I saw that as completely scary and unhinged. To finally throw away everything related to his old life, he then moved to my city and started again. I asked him if his parents knew about his child. He said yes, that though they didn't like his ex, they were active grandparents until he decided to terminate his rights. Once he did, his whole side of the family cut the child off, wanted nothing to do with him. I have met his family and extended family many times, and not once was the child mentioned. How do you do that? How do you just deprive your grandson of a relationship with your side of the family just because your son decided to end his involvement? He told me he would give me time, but that I helped him realize that he was child-free and that we belonged together. I told him that it was over and I never wanted to see him again, that there was no fixing this, and I left him after that. I'm now figuring out how to leave the city immediately, but I can't for a few months since I have a job contract to fulfill. In the meantime, I'm looking for another job far away and avoiding him and his family who keeps trying to get in contact with me to explain his side. I've also ended the friendship with the friend who knew he had a kid and went along with the lies. I know that his other friends in the city we live in probably knew as well, but I have no proof of that. However, there's no way only one friend knew, especially since a lot of them have been friends for decades. I just don't understand what the end goal was here. I don't understand how he doesn't see how wrong he was in what he did. I don't understand how he thought he could make a whole child disappear. Though I am child-free, children should be protected, should be loved and cared for, and eliminating yourself as a father figure and then having your family withdraw their involvement is going to have a severe impact on this child once they understand. I know I did nothing to cause this, but one day this child will realize his dad gave him up to be with a woman he barely knew, and I just can't imagine the trauma that is going to cause. I can't believe he did this to me, and more importantly to his son. He has shown me he's capable of anything, and my main goal is to now leave this city. Before I leave though, my plan is to tell everyone, and I mean everyone, about what he did, but for now, I'm laying low and just going to ignore him for my own safety. Am I wrong for stealing my sister's thunder on her engagement party? My 23 female sister, 25 female, recently got engaged to her fiance, 26 male, after they'd been dating for a year. Their engagement party was basically a dinner with friends and close relatives, and my sister went all out on the food. To her, marriage is a huge deal, and she's had her whole wedding and marriage life planned out since we were kids. I've never felt the same excitement for weddings and kids and such things, even though I do want it at some point. And since I'm a lesbian in a homophobic family, I long ago accepted the Wait, what? I've never felt the same excitement for weddings and kids and such things, even though I do want it at some point. And since I am a lesbian in a homophobic family, I long ago accepted that a big fancy wedding with my father walking me down the aisle isn't part of the plan. This doesn't sadden me much, but my sister, who's the only one in the family who knows about my sexuality, has been convinced that I'm jealous of her since she started dating her fiance. The dinner started out great, but after the main course, my family and relatives started asking about my dating life. It was a pretty harmless question at first, such as, when are you getting a boyfriend and why aren't you dating? I saw that boy hitting on you yesterday. It annoyed me, but my sister seemed even more annoyed. After dessert, when the alcohol started kicking in, the questions got a little out of hand. My mom said, I can't believe your sister got engaged first. You've always been more social. And my grandma commented that I was the more attractive sister. That is mean. My sister obviously got hurt by this, and I caught her crying in the bathroom at one point. I tried to talk to her, but all she said was, Happy, you've made my engagement all about you, and then avoided me for the rest of the party. So this is the part where I may have been the bad guy. After my aunt asked when I would get a boyfriend for the millionth time, and I had my millionth glass of wine, I told her that I'd never get a boyfriend, but when I got a girlfriend, she'd be the first to know. I then stormed out of the apartment, accidentally knocking a glass over, and took a cab home. One of my sister and I's mutual friend who was at the party told me the next day that a wild discussion about what I said to my aunt was held and that the party was cut short. My sister locked herself in her room crying and everyone went home. I have now been blocked by most of my family and relatives. My sister sent me a nasty text about how me coming out at her party stole her thunder, and my mother no longer considers me family. I'm not going to try to make up excuses for my behavior because I definitely could have been a more supporting sister, but I just wanted to know, am I the asshole?
Am I wrong for frightening my nephew and making him traumatized for life? I had a cookout at my place on the 4th of July and my daughter's 13 Switch went missing. I reached out to family members and my wife's sister Kara said that my daughter gave it as a gift to her son Stevie 6 for his upcoming birthday. But when I asked my daughter, she said that wasn't true and she only let him use it so they could all play Mario Kart. So now of course my daughter is upset and I tried to call Kara back, but she's insisting the Switch is now Stevie's. And she's insisting that my daughter is too old to play anyways or will outgrow it soon and it was a gift to Stevie. She also called my daughter an Indian giver. After this, I contacted my uncle who is a police officer. He watches Kara's house and a few of his friends went over and threatened to arrest Stevie and Kara over stolen property. After this, Kara did reluctantly give it back after an incident with the officer that she could have been arrested for. And the officer warned Stevie that next time he steals, they're going to jail. Am I wrong for frightening my nephew and making him traumatized for life? Kara reluctantly gave it back after an incident with the officer that she could have been arrested for. The officer warned Stevie that next time he steals, both him and his mom will go to jail, and they let my sister-in-law go without incident. Now sister-in-law is saying that Stevie has been crying non-stop and having issues sleeping because he doesn't want to go to jail. And of course she's blaming me and my family for traumatizing her son. I won't lie, my response might have been heartless because it was, I guess he'll never steal again, and Kara thinks he'll be traumatized for life, making a big deal over a stupid game. Top comment says, your sister-in-law got caught stealing and is trying to deflect by telling you her son is traumatized. She thought you just backed down and let her steal from your daughter, so no, not wrong. But then the response to this comment says, so you think the 6-year-old is secretly doing just fine after an honest-to-God police officer came to his house and said he was taking them to jail? What do you guys think? Am I wrong for leaving my family vacation after they forced me and my pregnant wife to sleep in a bunk bed? Me and my family went on a vacation at a location around 8 hours away for a wedding. I have 2 sisters and both are married and one has a 1-year-old kid. My parents rented an Airbnb so the whole family could stay at the same place for 5 days. Check-in was at 4 p.m. and both my sisters and parents got there on time. But me and my wife, who's 7.5 months pregnant, arrived about 30 minutes late. As we're unpacking the car, we asked what room is ours, and my mom responds, "You get the bunk bed." Me thinking it was a joke, say, "Ooh, I get the top bunk." Their response was, "No, actually, you get the bunk bed." They were 100% serious. While my other two sisters got a room for themselves and their husbands with queen-size beds, and me and my wife got the literal kids' room with a bunk bed. Me and my wife didn't want to cause a scene and seem ungrateful, so we decided to give the bed a try for one night. But fast forward to bedtime, it felt like sleeping on a wooden board. Am I wrong for leaving my family vacation after they forced me and my pregnant wife to sleep in a bunk bed? It's extremely uncomfortable even for me, which means my wife was in a lot more pain due to being pregnant. We tossed and turned for a couple more hours and finally agreed to sleep on the couch in the living room. We got a couple hours of sleep when my dad woke up and saw us on the couch and decided to go back to bed to not disturb us. Again, we didn't want to create a scene, so we went back upstairs and tried to get more sleep on the bunk bed. We get around an hour of the worst sleep I've ever had and just decided to wake up and go downstairs. Knowing we couldn't do that for another night, we decided to book a hotel room. I booked it for a couple more nights to get past the wedding, and then we'd leave for home. After explaining the situation to my whole family, instead of accepting it or helping us, most of them started to get annoyed. They said that it's just another way for us to distance ourselves from the family, and we just sternly said we made our decision and they had to accept it. But now they're irritated and claiming we ruined the trip.